At 15, my mom dumped me in the snow, called me a mistake, and said I'd never get a penny from her again. Yesterday, I sent an envelope to her office, and now she's leaving 89 voicemails begging me to talk. I haven't said a word. I was 15 when my mom, Lydia, decided I didn't belong in her new life. It was the middle of a Michigan snowstorm when she and her new husband, Greg, packed all my stuff into black trash bags. Not boxes, not suitcases, trash bags. Greg stood in the doorway like he was guarding something valuable, while Mom ripped my school certificates off the fridge and tore them up. I remember her saying, "You're Aaron's kid, not mine anymore. I need peace in this house." Greg smirked and said, "We finally get to have a real family now that your mistake's leaving." That's the word he used, mistake. Mom tossed a crumpled $50 bill at my feet and told me to figure it out. When I tried to grab my winter coat from the closet, she ripped it from my hands and said I could borrow one from the Salvation Army. Then she dragged my trash bags to the end of the driveway and said if I ever came back, she'd call the cops and say I was violent. Greg yelled from the porch that they'd press charges if I tried to harass them again. I stood there, numb in the falling snow, with my life sitting in 6 hefty bags and my mom's porch light flicking off like a door slamming on my existence. I waited until my fingers went stiff before I finally called my dad. Aaron showed up 20 minutes later in his rusted red pickup. He didn't say anything, just loaded my bags into the truck bed and drove me across town to his apartment. He worked construction, lived in a tiny 2-bedroom place that smelled like sawdust and coffee. He cleared out his office and told me, "You can stay as long as you need." We never talked about what happened. He didn't ask, and I couldn't answer without falling apart. What I didn't know then was that Lydia had a plan. Greg wasn't just some boyfriend she married for love. He had money, sales director for a car dealership, clean credit, a house on the good side of town. He was Lydia's shot at rewriting her whole life, pretending she'd never been divorced, never had a kid, never struggled. And I ruined that image. I was the living proof of everything she wanted to bury. Every time Greg looked at me, he saw someone else's DNA living in his house, someone he didn't control. And Lydia couldn't stand that reminder, so she erased me. She changed her phone number that same night, blocked me on everything. When I tried calling from Dad's phone, she texted back, "If you contact me again, I'll get a restraining order." 6 months later, they moved without saying where. I figured that was it, end of story. But it wasn't. Because what Lydia didn't know, or maybe what she forgot, was that my grandparents had set up a trust when I was born. A quiet little legal thing with my name on it. And buried inside that trust was a clause about a certain house. Her house. The one she kicked me out of. She didn't own it. She was just living in it until I turned 23. After that, it was mine, completely, legally, untouchably mine. And now, 8 years later, I'm 23. 2 weeks ago, the deed transferred. Lydia's living in my house, thinking it's hers. Tomorrow, she's getting a notice from my lawyer telling her she's got 60 days to get out. And I can't stop smiling. What she doesn't know yet, what makes this so much sweeter, is that Greg's name isn't on anything. And when she finds out, she's going to realize that the man she threw me away for has been lying to her, too. When I moved in with my dad, I was just a quiet, angry kid who didn't know how to exist without being unwanted. Aaron wasn't perfect. He drank too much coffee, worked long hours, forgot birthdays, but he showed up. He fixed what broke, kept food on the table, and treated me like I mattered just for being there. That alone was new. He never spoke Lydia's name, but I could feel her ghost in the silence between us. Every time he came home late and dropped his tool belt on the counter, I'd catch him staring at me like he wanted to say something and just couldn't. It took me a while to stop checking my phone for her messages. They never came. The thing is, Lydia didn't just move on, she rebuilt herself. She took Greg's last name, dyed her hair, scrubbed her old social media accounts, and started telling people she had no kids. I only found that out years later, when one of her old coworkers ran into me at the grocery store and said, "Wait, you're Lydia's son." She told everyone she couldn't have children. That one hit me harder than I expected. By then, I was in community college, working nights at a warehouse, living mostly on caffeine and cheap takeout. Dad had got me a job helping him with drywall and roofing on weekends. He'd say things like, "You learn to fix what other people ruin, you'll always have work." He never said it, but I think he meant people too. I didn't think much about the trust. My grandparents had died when I was little, and the paperwork was something Dad mentioned once, some old agreement that wouldn't matter until I was grown. But on my 23rd birthday, I got a letter from a law office in downtown Grand Rapids. It said the trust had dissolved and full ownership of the house on Maple Street was now legally mine. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Lydia had been living there all this time, posting pictures of her beautiful home, her dream kitchen, her perfect family, on her new Facebook account that I occasionally stalked from a burner profile. But when I called the lawyer, he confirmed every detail. The deed was in my name. Lydia had been living rent-free in my property for 8 years. The irony nearly made me choke. I spent 2 weeks reviewing the documents, making sure everything was airtight. My lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, said she had no claim. None. She was a temporary resident under a trust provision that expired on my 23rd birthday. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to take the house back quietly. I wanted her to know exactly who she'd erased, and that he'd come back with a pen, not a fist. So I had Whitaker draft a notice. Formal, legal, polite. It said she had 60 days to vacate the property. Attached were copies of the trust, the transfer deed, and a letter explaining that the rightful owner, me, was reclaiming his property. But I added one more thing. A note written in my own handwriting, folded inside the envelope. It said, "You told me I'd never see another dollar from you. You were right, but you've been living on mine for 8 years. Time's up." Whitaker sent it by courier on a Thursday morning. By Friday, my phone had 40 missed calls. The first voicemail was her whispering my name like she'd seen a ghost. The fifth was her crying. By the 12th, she was screaming that I couldn't do this to her, that I was being cruel. By the 20th, she said she'd call the police. Then Greg started calling. He sounded calm at first, salesman voice, telling me we could talk this out. By his third message, he wasn't calm anymore. He said I was vindictive, that I didn't understand what I was doing to them financially. I didn't answer. I just stared at my phone and realized I was finally in control of the story. And then, on Monday morning, Lydia sent one last message. "We're coming to talk. You can't hide behind lawyers forever." She said she'd be at my dad's apartment that afternoon. I didn't reply, but I made coffee, set out the documents, and waited. Because after 8 years of silence, my mother finally wanted to talk about family, and I had a few things to say about that. Monday afternoon, 3:07 p.m. I remember the time because I'd been staring at the clock for the last 10 minutes, my heart pounding like it was trying to punch through my chest. Dad was still at work, which meant I'd be facing them alone, exactly how I wanted it. I had the legal papers spread out on the coffee table like evidence at a trial. The trust documents, the deed transfer, the eviction notice. My laptop sat open with my lawyer's number on the screen, just in case they tried to pull anything. When the doorbell rang, I let them wait 30 seconds before answering. Lydia looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was lighter, probably dyed. Her skin stretched too tight across her face like she hadn't slept in days. Greg stood behind her in his usual salesman uniform, button-up, polished shoes, fake confidence. They walked in without asking. Lydia started talking immediately, voice trembling but still trying to sound in control. "Aaron, this has gone too far," I cut her off. "It's Eli. You haven't earned the right to use that name anymore." That hit her. She flinched, then tried again, softer this time. "Eli, honey, this is all a big misunderstanding. I didn't know about the trust. If I had, things would have been different." I pointed to the document with her signature on it from 20 years ago. "You did know. You just thought you'd get away with pretending I didn't exist until it stopped mattering." Her eyes darted to Greg. He looked down, jaw tight. "Even if that's true," he said, "we've maintained that house for 8 years. Paid the utilities, the property taxes, did renovations, new roof, new appliances. We've invested tens of thousands. You can't just throw us out without compensation." I smiled, that small, quiet kind of smile that makes people nervous. "Read the clause under Section 3B. Any improvements made during the trust period were done at the resident's own expense. No reimbursement." Ever, Lydia leaned forward to look, and when she saw her initials at the bottom of that same page, all the color drained from her face. Greg, on the other hand, went red. "This is insane. No court will enforce that." "It's predatory," I shrugged. "Then sue my dead grandparents, they're the ones who wrote it." Lydia's voice cracked. Eli, please, you don't understand what this will do to us. We've built our entire life there. That's our home. You mean my home. She tried another angle. I made mistakes, I know that, but I was under a lot of stress back then. The divorce, the money, trying to build something stable with Greg. I slammed my hand on the table. You kicked your 15-year-old kid out in a blizzard. You threw my clothes in garbage bags and told me you'd call the cops if I came back. Don't you dare say stress like that explains anything. Greg jumped in again, his tone slipping from professional to venom. You're proving exactly why we had to do it. You were impossible, angry, disrespectful. Lydia was trying to save herself. We couldn't keep living in that chaos. I stood. So your solution was to erase me? He crossed his arms. It worked, didn't it? We had peace for 8 years. For a moment the room went dead quiet. Lydia's eyes flicked between us, panic starting to show. Then she broke, tears, shaking hands, the full performance. Please, Eli. 60 days isn't enough. We don't have savings for a new place yet. If you force this now, you'll ruin everything. You'll destroy your mother's life. I leaned forward. You destroyed it yourself the day you picked him over me. That shut her up. Greg glared at me like he wanted to punch something, then said, You think this makes you the hero? You're just as cruel as she said you'd turn out. You're your father's son, bitter and small. I walked to the door and opened it. 60 days, not one more. Lydia started crying again, saying she couldn't believe I was doing this to her. Greg muttered something about lawyers and slammed the door as they left. I watched their car disappear down the street. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the broken one. I felt powerful. And as I stood there in the silence, my phone buzzed with a new text. From Lydia. You don't know what you're walking into, Eli. That house isn't what you think it is. 2 days after the confrontation, I got another text from Lydia. It just said, Please meet with us. There are things about the house you don't know, big things. I ignored it at first. But after the third text and a voicemail where she sounded almost terrified, I started wondering if maybe she wasn't bluffing. So I agreed to meet. Neutral ground, a coffee shop on the east side. I got there early, sat facing the door, and watched them walk in together. Lydia looked pale, like she hadn't eaten in days. Greg's jaw was tight, but his eyes were different, jittery. Nervous, even. They sat down across from me. Lydia started right away. There are problems with the property, she said. Foundation damage, water in the basement, electrical issues. We've had contractors come out and the estimates are bad, really bad. I didn't even blink. Funny, because I had an inspection 2 weeks ago. Everything's fine. Greg tensed. Lydia looked confused for half a second before Greg snapped. Then your inspector missed things. We've been living there for 8 years. We know what's wrong. I slid a copy of the inspection report across the table. Original roof. No foundation issues. Wiring up to code. You lied. Lydia's mouth opened, then closed. Greg glared at her, furious she'd been caught. Finally, she said quietly, We needed you to back off. You don't understand how much we have riding on that house. I leaned back. Then explain it. She looked at Greg. He stayed silent, jaw locked, so she kept talking. Greg's parents gave us $50,000 last year as an early inheritance. They thought we owned the house. We didn't correct them. It took a few seconds for the words to register. You told them the house was yours. Lydia nodded, her eyes wet. They thought they were helping us build equity, investing in our future. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Greg cut her off, voice sharp. Don't make it sound like a scam. They gave us that money willingly. I laughed. Under false pretenses. He slammed his hand on the table. Watch your mouth. But he didn't scare me anymore. So, I said slowly, you lied to his parents, took 50 grand, spent it while living rent-free in a house that was never yours. And now that the truth's coming out, you're panicking because they're going to find out. Neither of them said a word. Lydia just started crying again. That's what this is really about, I said. You don't care about the house, you care about your reputation. Greg finally snapped. You think you're so righteous. You're just a bitter little boy with paperwork. You're using your grandparents' money to play God. Lydia reached for my hand. I pulled it back. She whispered, If we lose that house, Greg's parents will cut us off completely. We'll lose everything. I stared at her. You already did, you just don't know it yet. As I got up to leave, Greg's phone buzzed on the table. The name flashing across the screen made Lydia's face go white. Dad, he grabbed the phone and stepped outside. Lydia's breathing quickened. When he came back 10 minutes later, he looked like someone had hit him in the stomach. "They found out," he said quietly. "My parents know." He turned to me, eyes burning. "What did you do?" I frowned. "Nothing. But I didn't need to. The eviction filing was public record. They'd probably stumbled across it." Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. Oh my God, Greg, what are we going to do?" He looked at her, and for the first time I saw it not love, not fear, just disgust. "You did this," he hissed. "You dragged me into this mess." Lydia started crying again, but he didn't comfort her. He just stood up and walked out of the cafe, leaving her sitting there shaking. That was when she said something that froze my blood. "You think you're getting away clean," she whispered. "But that house is cursed with everything that man left behind." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" She wiped her eyes, stood, and leaned close to my ear. "I'm not the only one who lied, Eli. Your father isn't who you think he is." Then she walked out. That night I couldn't sleep. Lydia's words kept looping in my head. "Your father isn't who you think he is." I wanted to dismiss it as another one of her manipulations, another desperate trick to make me back off. But she'd said it like a confession, not a threat. And the way Greg had looked at her before walking out, there was something real in that moment. Fear. I sat at my desk until sunrise, scrolling through old legal files, property records, anything with Aaron's name on it. My dad had always been straight with me, maybe too quiet about the past, but honest. Still, Lydia had planted something dark in my head, and I couldn't shake it. By 8 a.m., I made a decision. I was done letting them control the story. No more reacting. No more waiting. If Lydia wanted to play dirty, I'd go nuclear. First, I called Mr. Whittaker, my lawyer. I asked him to confirm whether Aaron had ever been part of the trust or if his name appeared in any of the estate documents. He checked. "No," he said. "It was set up exclusively for you by your grandparents. Your father had no ownership or legal ties to the property." Good, that part was clean. Next, I started thinking about Greg and Lydia's little early inheritance. If Greg's parents had given them $50,000 based on lies, that was fraud, maybe not a criminal case, but definitely civil. Which meant they were about to lose a lot more than a house. I spent the next day gathering every message, every voicemail, every fake claim about property damage, everything that proved they'd been trying to manipulate me into letting them stay. I sent the whole file to Whittaker and asked him to prepare for any legal counterattack they might attempt. Then I called my dad. When he picked up, I told him everything: the trust, the house, the 50 grand, Lydia's claim about him. He didn't say anything for a while, just breathed into the phone. Finally, he said, "She's lying, that's what she does when she's cornered." But his voice cracked a little at the end. I pressed. "Dad, what did she mean when she said you're not who I think you are?" He sighed, long and heavy. "We'll talk about it when I get home." He hung up before I could ask more. That night, I started drafting my own plan, not just for eviction, but for exposure. If they wanted to drag this out, fine. I'd make sure everyone they'd lied to saw the truth. Greg's parents, their friends, Lydia's coworkers, everyone. I still had the screenshots of her fake homeowner posts on Facebook, the ones where she bragged about remodeling her kitchen. I thought about mailing copies of the eviction notice to her office, the school district where she worked, maybe even posting a public record link to her own neighborhood page. I wanted her to feel what she'd made me feel at 15, small, humiliated, erased. But something kept holding me back. Not guilt, something colder. It was Dad. When he came home that night, he didn't look me in the eye. He poured himself a cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and said quietly, "Lydia wasn't completely lying." My stomach dropped. "About what?" He stared at his hands. "The house, the trust. Your grandparents never wanted Lydia to have it, not because of how she treated me, because of what she found out before the divorce." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He looked up then, his eyes tired but sharp. "Eli, I wasn't supposed to tell you this ever, but that house wasn't just where you grew up. It's where your mother found out who I really was." I waited, frozen. "She found letters," he said. "Old ones. From a woman I'd been seeing before the divorce. She was pregnant." I felt my throat tighten. "You cheated on her," he nodded once. "And that child would have been your half-sibling." The room tilted. "So she kicked me out," I said slowly, "because she couldn't kick you out." He didn't answer. I stood up, shaking. "So you let her destroy me instead. You let her erase me because you didn't want her to tell anyone your secret." "Eli, I didn't let him finish. I grabbed my coat and walked out. That night, I sat in my truck outside the Maple Street house. The lights were on. Lydia's silhouette moved past the window, still pretending it was hers. She'd thrown me away for a man. He'd let her do it to protect himself. And now I had both of them exactly where I wanted them, trapped by their own lies, standing on my property. But I wasn't sure anymore who I wanted to ruin first. 3 days after Dad's confession, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize. No subject line, just 2 words in the body. We should talk. It was signed J. At first, I thought it was spam. But when I hovered over the sender's address, the name hit me like a brick. J. Hale 87. Hale, my dad's last name. I don't know why I clicked it. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe because deep down I already knew what it meant. The message was short. You don't know me, but I think we're related. I've been trying to find Aaron Hale for years. He stopped responding when I was a kid. My mom said he had another family he didn't want to ruin. I found your name through property records tied to his old address. There was an attachment, a photo. It was a girl about my age, maybe a little younger. Brown hair, same eyes as mine, same jawline. I sat there staring at the screen, my mind refusing to catch up. I forwarded the email to Dad without a word. 10 minutes later, he called. Eli, he said, voice shaking, please don't respond to her yet. So it's true, I said. Silence, she's your daughter. Yes, he whispered. Something in me cracked open. It wasn't even anger this time, just this hollow ache that spread through my chest like poison. She reached out to you, I said. And you ignored her. I didn't know what to say, he said. I thought it was better if she didn't get dragged into all of this. All of this, I snapped. You mean your mess, your lies. You let Lydia destroy me, so your secret wouldn't come out. And now you're still pretending you're protecting people. You're just protecting yourself. He didn't argue, which made it worse. I hung up. That night, I met with my lawyer again. Whitaker asked if everything was okay. I told him the eviction was still on schedule. But as he packed up the papers, he said something that made me stop. You know, he said, your mother called our office. She's desperate. Offered to buy herself more time. Said she's willing to sign over anything to avoid getting sued. Anything? I asked. He nodded. She even mentioned your father. That's when it hit me Lydia had known about the affair. She'd known there was another kid. Maybe she'd even known where they were. And if she was desperate enough to use that information now, she wasn't bluffing anymore. The next morning, I got another call. This time from an unknown number. It was Lydia. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Eli, I think it's time we tell each other the truth. I didn't say anything. You think I threw you out because of Greg, she said. That's only half of it. I kicked you out because you were his son. And I couldn't stand to look at you after what he did. What he did? He got another woman pregnant while we were still married, she said quietly. Then he told her he'd leave me. He didn't. She showed up at our house one night with a baby in her arms. Do you remember the week we went to stay with my sister in Lansing? I did. I was 9. She'd called it a vacation. That's why, she said. He was getting a DNA test. The baby wasn't hers. It was his, your father's. I tried to forgive him, but every time I looked at you, I saw him lying to me. You looked just like he did back then, same eyes, same guilt. I felt sick. So you punished me, I said. You couldn't hurt him, so you hurt me. There was a pause. Then she said, he deserved to lose you more than I did. I almost dropped the phone. You're insane. No, she said, her voice breaking. I'm just tired of carrying everyone else's sins. And if you think you're the only one who deserves that house, you're wrong. That house is the last thing connecting any of us, and I'm not leaving until I take something back. She hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time, trying to process everything, the lies, the cheating, the years of silence. Then another thought hit me like ice water. Lydia didn't know that Greg's parents were now threatening legal action over the $50,000. If she thought she was the only one who'd been lied to, she was about to find out Greg had been hiding something from her, too. That night, I went online and did some digging. Property records, debt filings, anything with Greg's name. And there it was, a quiet little loan taken out just 3 months ago. $50,000, in his name only, secured by collateral in dispute. The house. He'd tried to borrow against my property. I leaned back, breathing hard. Lydia had ruined me for revenge. My dad had broken me with secrets. But Greg, he'd just made himself the easiest target in the world. and I was going to take him apart piece by piece. I never wanted more proof that grown people are allowed to be monsters, until Lydia finally told me why she'd shoved a 15-year-old kid into a blizzard with garbage bags and $50. I'd already known she'd wanted a fresh start with Greg. I'd already felt the electric, stupid clarity of being abandoned. But the reason she whispered to me in the dark that night, the one that turned plain cruelty into something surgical and premeditated, that one put a cold weight in my chest. She didn't do it because she was fragile or blindsided. She did it because she had been bought into being someone else, and I was a risk to the currency of that purchase. Here's what she actually admitted. Years before she met Greg, she found out something about my dad that broke her. She found letters, not petty cheating notes, but a chain of proof Aaron had another life. A woman, a child, names, addresses, promises, evidence. If that got out, it wouldn't just ruin Aaron, it would drag Lydia's name through everything she was trying to erase. The divorce had already been ugly. Rumors would have turned into courtroom testimony. People would ask why Lydia had stayed, who she knew and when she knew it, and suddenly she would be defined by the messy, inconvenient past she'd tried so hard to bury. So she made a choice, not a panicked one. A clean, vineyard gray suit kind of choice. Eliminate the reminder. That's the chilling part. She treated me like a liability on a balance sheet, not a person to be protected, a variable to be zeroed out. She told me, with that maddening calm she used when she wanted me to sympathize with her, I could have had stability. I could have had safety. I chose life over chaos. Life, she meant Greg's life, the job, the house on the good side of town, the approval of in-laws who would hand you $50,000 if you look like you belong. And Greg. He wasn't some incidental partner in this. He was the product Lydia aimed to manufacture herself into. He didn't just want a wife. He wanted a spotless narrative. No exes, no leftover kids, no explanations. He wanted to hand his parents a version of his life that was tidy and believable. A teenaged stepson who existed in the past was a threat to that fiction. So he leaned on Lydia, expertly, the way people with power lean, not with threats of bruises, but with the kind of pressure that makes someone think they're choosing on their own. He whispered the same things she eventually repeated to me. We need peace. We need room to breathe. You're wrecking my chances. And my father, the man who drove up in that rusted pickup and took my bags, he did something worse than be absent. He chose self-preservation over me. He let her erase me because he couldn't risk his secret blowing up his life. He confessed that later. He kept quiet about the letters because exposing them would have entangled him in years of litigation, rumor, and shame. He figured silence would hurt less than the alternative. That choice, the conscious, careful choice to let your kid be evicted into a snowstorm to preserve your own reputation, it's the sort of thing that strips away any claim to decency. So the villainy here isn't some heat-of-the-moment cruelty. It's calculation. It's the knowledge that people are valued only as long as they're useful to the identities others are buying for themselves. Lydia traded me for the ability to be a different woman. Greg traded me for a credible backstory to show his parents. Dad traded me for the illusion that the past could stay buried. That's the cold, horrifying truth. They didn't lose anything by tossing me away. They gained a future. My existence threatened their ledger, so they subtracted me. Simple math, complete cruelty. Knowing that, you stop hoping for regret. You stop waiting for apologies that will actually mean anything. They didn't make a terrible choice in a moment of stress. They executed a plan. And plans are lawful, logical, and terrifying because they are unemotional. They're designed to work. When Lydia finished speaking, she looked at me like she expected me to cry or to beg. I felt nothing like that. I felt a slow, steady rage, the kind that isn't theatrical but precise. Because once you understand someone treated you like a calculation, the moral question becomes less about forgiveness and more about accounting. I'd spent 8 years rebuilding. They'd spent 8 years pretending. Now I had the receipts. And receipts are something a monster with a ledger always forgets to burn. Move-out day came on a Thursday. Cold, gray morning. The kind where the sky hangs low and heavy, like it's waiting for something to break. I pulled up to Maple Street with my lawyer, my dad, and a locksmith. The driveway was half empty. A moving truck sat out front, doors open, a few boxes left on the porch. I half expected Lydia to throw herself at me again, screaming or sobbing or doing whatever she thought would make me hesitate. Instead, Greg answered the door. He looked like hell, beard overgrown, eyes bloodshot, shirt half-buttoned. "We need more time," he said, his voice flat but angry. "You can't just—" "I can," I said. "And I did," my lawyer spoke before Greg could continue. "As of noon today, the legal residency period ends. If you're not out by then, law enforcement will handle it." That word, law enforcement, finally made him flinch. Lydia appeared behind him, eyes swollen, hair pulled back. She wasn't crying anymore, just staring empty. "You're really doing this," she said quietly. "Yes," I said. She glanced past me at Dad. "You let him go through with this?" Dad didn't say anything. He just looked at her, the kind of look that carries 8 years of unspoken guilt. She laughed once, bitter and small. "You're both monsters." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I didn't make one out of my own kid." They left by 11:30. No yelling this time. No scene, just silence. Greg loaded the last box into the car, slammed the trunk, and muttered, "You'll regret this." Lydia didn't even turn around. The locksmith started changing the locks before their car even disappeared. When he handed me the new keys, something in me unclenched for the first time in almost a decade. I walked through every room, the kitchen where I used to do homework, the hallway where my mom once hung my drawings, the living room where she told me I was ruining her life. It all looked smaller than I remembered. On the fridge, there was still a magnet shaped like a red apple. School giveaway, probably. I pulled it off and threw it in the trash. That night I moved in. My own bed, my walls, my house. A week later, the fallout started. Greg's parents filed a fraud complaint. I didn't have to lift a finger. The eviction had already made their lies public. They demanded the full $50,000 back plus damages. From what I heard, Greg tried to blame Lydia. Lydia tried to blame Greg, and both of them ended up broke. She lost her job at the school when the truth started circling, a community scandal, as one of her old coworkers put it. Apparently, someone leaked copies of the public eviction notice to the local Facebook group. I didn't do it, but I didn't stop it either. Greg's parents reached out to me once. His father, a quiet man named Alan, asked to meet. He said, "I just wanted to hear your side. My son's been lying to us for years." I told him the truth. He didn't defend Greg. He just said, "Then it's good the house went to the right person." Meanwhile, Dad tried to talk again. Said he wanted to explain, maybe even apologize. I told him I'd think about it, but I haven't decided if I will. Some things don't need closure, they just need distance. A month after the eviction, I was sitting on the front steps one night, coffee in hand, when I saw a car crawl past slowly. A silver SUV. Lydia's. She didn't stop. Just drove past, turned around, and passed again. She did it 3 times. On the 3rd pass, I stood up and watched her headlights fade down the street. I didn't wave, didn't go after her, didn't feel anything but stillness. Because this quiet, steady life, built on the ruins of what they threw away, is the revenge. I fixed what they broke. I built something real while they built lies. And now they're out there, choking on the truth. As for me, I'm home. The kid they tried to erase owns the house they pretended to own. Sometimes, justice doesn't come with shouting or chaos. Sometimes, it's just a signature, a new lock, and a steady breath in the doorway of what's yours. 8 years ago, she told me I was ruining her life. Turns out, I was just reclaiming mine.